Today, we're going to explore the CARE Learning Framework, our through line of human learning. This is not only the product of some of my doctorate research work from the University of Virginia, but it's now become a global collaborative project to find a common vision for how to live and learn better together. You know, one thing that everybody can agree on as it relates to education and teaching our children and each other well is that we want to be good people and make good decisions. But as I was asking many thousands of people during my research, well, what does that really mean? And what should we be learning? Can we well define that a little bit better? Well, one, it's like these questions go to some of our very foundational family and religious values. We also, it's not easy to just say, "Hey, let's all love each other. Let's stand for truth." I mean, these are undoubtedly good, but some of the care learning framework positions the concept of care, which the vernacular word to care really means feeling and showing curiosity and compassion, which already right there, that foundation of living a life with curiosity and compassion is a great way to live. But the care and learning framework, these first two frameworks here are I call it the care compass, or sort of the direction, or generally the where, or an orientation of good learning. But then the how, collaborative, rigorous learning, sometimes I call that the care method. So in general, being a good person and the values underpinning that, and making good decisions, living and learning better together, those two concepts coming together, expanded, creates the care learning framework. I want to first share a little bit about these 7 C's, our community learning values. These universal learning values drive learners to develop mastery of what we call the 5 essential learning domains. Think of the 7 C's as what we all agree on to be almost like a common template for a pair of shoes. And when we all put on a pair of shoes, we're sort of supported and we're able to advance toward our own goals. But then it's like, well, beyond that, like, what is good to learn? Well, in traditional school, we often focus on just this concept of scholarship, the idea of researching, learning new things, facts, exposure. We think of it as academic. You know, you learn math, you learn science, you have historical, the timeline of human history. But we really know that there is so much more to life holistically than just your scholarship. And so we position that life ready learners, which generally life readiness is a concept that we like to use as the goal for students. We want students to become life ready and advance towards life readiness. And those kind of learners integrate all 5 of these essential learning domains, which represent what will be important for us to learn in the future. Our emotional and then creative intelligences unlock our scholarship. So we don't start with scholarship as like this vision for graduation, but really that emotional intelligence, almost like in some sense, is the heart of learning. That's why there's a little heart here. And that your emotional intelligence, we know that emotions are required even for memory neurobiologically. And so we position almost like if there's a first thing or a priority of what to learn, learning about yourself, your emotions, how to recognize, understand, label, express, and regulate your emotions, dealing with conflict, understanding other people, how to empathize with them. That emotional intelligence is like the priority in our understanding in the care learning framework. And then our creative intelligence. So, innovation, generating ideas, solving problems, seeing solutions through, and that our emotional intelligence really helps us navigate all of that. Because if we're only all about creativity before emotional intelligence, this can lead us to, let's say, just continuously generating ideas and finding cool new things to do, but then really not understanding yourself or not connecting at a deep human level. And so this entire graphic here, you can see almost then represents a Venn diagram where it's like you almost want to be here in the center, emotional and then creative intelligence and then scholarship, while also integrating practical skills and technology. Together, all five of these essential learning domains sort of like give that orientation of learning, which these seven C's sort of help us drive and walk and run through these essential learning domains. Um, a little bit more about curiosity and compassion. These are sort of the foundation. It's even kind of like at the bottom of these seven C's, almost like representing those pair of shoes that kind of lead through to collaboration. Curiosity is generally seeking to understand. Compassion is empathy with action. These are very important concepts because a lot of times when we hear an idea or someone is speaking to us or we see someone's project or something, and if we're like, I don't really care. I, I don't want to hear about that. That is kind of the opposite of curiosity, and it doesn't feel good. It's not inspiring. It's almost as if, oh, you don't matter. I don't want to hear any more about this. Whereas curious people are interested. It's like, oh, tell me more. Oh, that's interesting. Maybe I'll ask a question. I want to dig a little bit deeper. And also, curiosity is a great metacognitive tool when you're experiencing a moment of discomfort, especially if, let's say, someone says something or does something that maybe you have this negative emotion about. Maybe you feel disrespected, or maybe you're feeling hurt by something someone has said. Um, a curious person might clarify. A curious person might see what else might be going on. You know, maybe if someone is saying something mean, maybe they had a really rough time. Something was going on in the morning, and they're kind of lashing out and taking it out on you. Maybe they're projecting, and so we often teach curiosity and compassion, even like in tandem with emotional intelligence. Like, how can you take this first principle of seeking to understand and apply it to all sorts of parts of your life? These other five concepts here, these C's, are an homage or to the Virginia five C's: communication, critical thinking, collaboration, creative thinking, and citizenship. Um, this, maybe I'll touch here on citizenship first. Um, I mentioned first principles. We put forth that having these seven C's as like a fundamental orientation, like we are free to do and believe whatever we want. We're of the position that living a life fundamentally with these seven C's, understanding that we're all here together and that we all matter, and that's being mindful of and turning outward to our other fellow citizens. So, like living a life of citizenship, of collaboration, working well together, of critical thinking and seeking truth, of communication, realizing that getting our messages across and being heard, listening skills, presenting information, helping guide others toward understanding themselves. These are, if we're going to do anything with our freedom, we might choose to care. And we would do that in large part through these seven C's, which kind of put together create very caring people, caring teaching and learning, caring living. So that is a little bit about the direction of what we might think of as like, what is good to learn? Now, the care learning framework doesn't say exactly the things of what we should learn. Like, is the quadratic formula required? And that's how you demonstrate scholarship. What we can talk all about unpacking these five. Maybe that'll be for a separate video. But do just know that the care learning framework, in some sense, is a concept based vision that allows some flexibility. Because, for example, how exactly would we be good citizens, or how exactly might people show respect to each other? Well, an act of citizenship might mean that people are different, different cultures. We have different backgrounds, and that's the concept of respect might even mean something a little bit different. But trying to operate in this world as a global and local citizen is kind of the heart of what we're trying to get at here. This concept of collaboration was the topic of a good portion of my doctorate research. This care collaborative model, if you could like click on collaboration and learn more about it, like how do we collaborate, which is kind of a really foundational, profound question because humans are inherently collaborative. For example, we aren't spiders as a species who just live on our own. I mean, you can live on an island, but I think we can pretty much all agree that we collaborate as part of our nature. And so I was really interested in what is a universal process of collaboration. And what many people have come together to decide on is that this process of collaboration, emphasizing trusting relationships, support systems, collective ownership, synergistic partnerships, and inclusive celebration, that really leads groups to success. One of the most foundational principles and takeaways of everything I learned from this research is that trust and trusting relationships is absolutely essential to effectively all human learning. For example, if you don't feel safe around people, if you don't trust them, so you don't have that confidence or that feeling that you can be yourself and that you're going to be supported in return, and that you understand. Well, we can kind of unpack the nature of trust. There are these 5 subcomponents of trust that sort of make up the concept of trust. Understanding people's motivation and their intentions. For example, where are you coming from? What's your angle? And what's your why, the direction of your moral compass? Those make up people's motivations. And we generally kind of want to have a basic understanding of that in order to start building a trusting relationship. People's intentions. What do you mean when you just said that? What do you really want to have happen? And then trust is based on these other final 3 subconcepts: consistency, reliability, and transparency. So having a history with someone and that people are following through, that creates the concept of consistency. Because one of the things that we know about trust is that it takes time. It takes time to develop trust. And if someone like crosses you or they show that they're intentionally going to act in bad faith, that is a break of trust. And then there's a little bit of there's quite a bit of debate about the degree to which trust can be repaired. Um, and then reliability is like, can you predict someone's future actions uh, based on how much you know about them? So if you go up to someone and you ask for help and they say, "Oh yeah, I'll do this," like, can you really rely on them? Do you think that they're going to come through? And then transparency generally is honesty and openness. You can tell if someone is being honest, but they're not quite like opening up to you. And if someone is like choosing things that are technically true, but they're not really like fully maybe being vulnerable or sharing more with you, you can kind of tell. So there is a difference between being, let's say, just honest and being fully transparent. And also, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has to be transparent all the time. There are trust boundaries, and that's good. And that's okay. The care learning framework, we don't put forth that we should just trust everybody because the nature of trust, if let's say someone has bad intentions or a motivation that is not in your best interests, you wouldn't necessarily open up to them. And so it gets kind of deep, but the idea with great collaboration is that it would be great if we could build trust with each other and have trust be a foundation for this ideal vision of living and learning better together. Support systems, the idea of trusting and supporting each other. So, contributing is a big part of support, actually doing active helping, contributing to people, to groups. Um, Modeling, kind of actually walking the walk and talking the talk of excellence, showing how it's done. If you want to lead, be the model. I mean, that would be a great way to lead. Leadership isn't always necessarily just about getting people to do something directly, but show us how it's done. Show us how you care. How do you care about yourself? How do you care about others and learning? Um, Having some structure. Everybody flailing about in a state of chaos is not an act of support. There being defined roles, there being plans, ones that are flexible too, roles that have some flexibility, but also some actual definition. There are processes that are good to do. They reduce the cognitive load of individuals and the collective. One example is having an emergency evacuation, like a fire plan in a building. We want to have that down. We want to have that process down and practice. We want to have some structure to it so that everybody knows exactly where we're going to go, how are we going to behave. Because when it comes down to it, when there's an emergency, we want to just be ready for that. Our mind is going to be focusing on other things. We don't want to have to be recreating the wheel of how do we be safe when we're in that state. So having support systems and structures are very important. Um, this is a process as well. So it's kind of like linear in some sense, but then the nature of effective collaboration just kind of incorporates all five. Once we get into new groups together, we focus on building trust first. We get to know each other. We share why we're here. Where are we going? We have a common vision. We start to create those support systems and structures. And then we get to the concept of ownership at the individual and collective levels is like, yes, this is ours. This is what we want to do. There are a few components of ownership. One is initiative. If you are really taking ownership, you are taking charge of your learning. You are stepping up even when no one's telling you what to do. At the Care Society, you can just start helping people, for example. You don't need to wait for permission. If you see that someone asks a question, someone is saying, hey, can anyone help me learn this thing? Anybody know about this? And you have a resource or you have some knowledge, take some initiative, offer to help. Independence it is a little bit similar to initiative, but let's say you're working in a group and everyone has agreements about what each person is going to do when they kind of go off and they're finished with the meeting, for example. Actually practicing, finishing that task, using different techniques to help stay focused, seeing yourself through. Also, asking for help if you do need help. That would be an act of independence. So independence isn't always about like being alone. It's about like really making your own decisions at some level. Another concept of ownership is consequences. We have the freedom to make choices, but there are results of those choices. Consequences aren't always bad. Consequences, it's almost like an effect. It could have some sort of negative impact. Let's say you commit a crime, you might have to, let's say, pay a fine, go to jail. That's what we traditionally think of as consequences, getting in trouble. But also consequences if you let's say you help someone. Going back to that example. A consequence might be the impact that your help made, which would be a positive consequence. This idea of synergy, that we are all, when we fit together, our sum is greater than the sum of our individual parts. When we are all in this kind of like collective flow state, we're feeling that collective effervescence. We're all living and learning better together. We multiply each other's effects. We're all, in this sense, interdependent. We not only we act as independent learners, we also need each other, and we are better together. So part of synergy and that interdependence comes when, let's say, you have someone's project and that leads to a different project, and someone else creates a separate project to support that project, and then we've got this web of beautiful things happening, and then we're all building off of each other's learning. It's like this web or this tree or this ocean of learning that is can't be done without us coming together. This also synergy happens when we begin with the end in mind as well. So if we all have this common vision of like a caring world, for example, if we kind of work backwards from that, and we have this understanding that, hey, we're all in this together, we're trying to move towards this great direction, that already sort of like helps the process flow. And then celebration. The idea of what people normally think of as celebration is like, yay, we did it. That is part of it. Highlighting successes is an important part of celebration. Also, focusing. So, what I mean by that is there are times to celebrate some things and then times to switch focus. This often comes up when sometimes the same person or things are celebrated, and it's like, maybe let's highlight something else now. So in that idea, another big part of celebration is inclusion. So the idea that we all matter, we all have something to contribute, and that we want to be very mindful as well to be inclusive of everybody. We believe in the universal inherent value of humans. Everybody matters, each person, and in the final part of celebration I want to highlight is positivity. We don't always want to be like, let's say, some kind of toxic positivity, and yet I view the concept of joy as almost like a center of emotionally where learning might be. There's this in the ruler framework for emotional intelligence. There's this anchor tool called the mood meter, and joy is one of those positive and high energy emotions. And like when you're in that flow state, like you're really getting into your learning, you're loving it. It's almost like time and space don't mean much. You're in the zone. That's what we're going to talk about next, the zone of rigorous learning. Um, like that, you feel that there's something different going on, and your learning almost accelerates. There's almost like a synergy concept happening in your own brain. And so in some sense, like positive emotions, or at least not being overly stressed, feeling very bored or overly frustrated. Those actually inhibit learning. They prevent your brain from learning. Although there is like a healthy level of anxiety as well. Like, oh, I have a deadline coming up, so maybe I'm going to be a little bit more motivated to meet that deadline. Generally, these five concepts come together to create a process of collaboration that we call the CARE collaborative model. So that is like, again, if you could like click on collaboration. The next part of the CARE method, or collaborative rigorous learning, that's living and learning and teaching better together, collaborative rigorous learning, is the zone of rigorous learning, like that sweet spot of I call this a decision making framework. So if you think about like what makes a good rational decision, and how do you stay in what's called your zone of proximal development, which is like that sweet spot where something is an achievable challenge. You don't want to go through life just like being bored, being very comfortable all the time. Life is full of challenges. Discomfort is kind of, it is a fact of life. That doesn't mean we want to like seek pain all the time, but getting out of our comfort zone, choosing to learn something new, having a growth mindset, and persisting through things that are a little bit difficult, a little bit complex, and you're like, ooh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. I have this idea for, I want to build something cool. Maybe I want to design a video game. Maybe I want to learn a new language, or a new instrument, but like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. It's like, yes, you can do it. Like, you can learn. Everybody can learn. Maybe it's going to take you some time. Maybe you're going to need a little bit of help. Um, but set your goals at a level where you're going to be challenged. And then, what are the supports that you would need to get into that zone of proximal development? Will you need to look up more information? Will you need to ask for help? Will you need to collaborate? Will you need to develop other skills that will build up to this goal that you have in mind? Um, you also there's this idea of like maybe biting off more than you can chew. Being in the zone is kind of like that sweet spot. There's like too low for your goals, and then there's like too high. That's possible too. If you're like, by tomorrow I want to build an entire house. It's like, um, well, I mean, I guess if somehow you had the ability to do that, then okay, great. But maybe then it'll be helpful to look at this zone of rigorous learning a little bit more zoomed in here. So the zone of rigorous learning is a four-part decision-making framework. Um, the concept of alignment, or like the worth or merit of a decision. Let's say you have an idea for a project, and it's like, I want to start a fundraiser to raise money for scholarships for needy students. Well, alignment would say, is that even a worthy or a goal with merit? I would, in that case, like, yes. And like, why is that? Well, generally with alignment, we want to ask, is the decision that we want, is it aligned with our interests, the the needs of yourself and or your community, and the care learning framework? Well, in that case, that would be an act of citizenship and compassion. Like, you're thinking about the needs of others, particularly someone who doesn't have access to scholarships. Maybe they have financial need. That is a beautiful, wonderful thing. So then the idea of ease is very similar to that zone of proximal development. The concept of ease is like, are you actually able to do this thing? So, for example, if you wanted to make a purchase, do you have enough money for that? Do you have the time and expertise to get something done? And do you have like a process to get there? The concept of value is like, will it work? Is it going to actually be measurably effective? Will it have impact? So in the case of this project for doing a fundraiser, maybe it's a good idea in theory if it could be done. Let's say it's easy enough for you to do because maybe you have these different skills of how you could raise funds. Maybe you're thinking, okay, well, I could host a little mini concert because I have musical abilities, or I could send a social media post directly asking for donations, or maybe you've got some other ideas. The concept of value would be, well, like, if you really want to achieve that goal, maybe you might choose what you think might make the most money in the shortest amount of time. These concepts of alignment, ease, and value also relate to the educational concepts of curriculum, instruction, and assessment. So alignment, there's this little compass here. It's like a direction that's good. Same thing with curriculum. Curriculum is generally the what of learning. What is in the plan for learning and what is not in the plan for learning, and what is actually learned and what is not actually learned. So in the zone of rigorous learning, I make this explicit connection to these concepts because in like education, we use words like curriculum, instruction, and assessment, and trusting relationships, which is kind of like the barrier to learning. That's why I have trust here. That's kind of like guarding that zone of rigorous learning. This is like a Venn diagram. So like, you generally want to be like in the zone. Um, but even like the idea of instruction is just generally how we can guide students, the scaffolds, that's why there's a ladder here, the scaffolds to get from where a student currently is to where they slash we, but really they, right? Because the goals of the student is central to our philosophy, because we want to empower students to exercise their freedom with care, their goals. So how can we guide them there? That is generally just what instruction is. We want to make it easy such that they're in the zone. Not too easy. We don't want the people to be too comfortable all the time because we want people to grow. And that's kind of part of our role as educators is to provide that scaffolding. The idea of assessment that involves measuring learning and feedback. So the idea of demonstrating your learning. So, for example, if you're trying to learn Spanish, you want to learn how to speak Spanish, and you listen to people speaking Spanish, but you're never really demonstrating your learning. We believe it is valuable to actually use and apply the language in assessment. For example, this goes to many other areas. If you watch a video of someone driving or playing basketball, but you never actually drive or you never actually play basketball, it's like, are you really learning in the way that's you would be in the zone? We would say no. That doesn't mean it's not good to research and absorb information, but and I'll share more about this in the experiential learning cycle. But you want to apply and actually experience the learning. You want to learn by doing a good amount of the time. The final part of the zone of rigorous learning is this concept of trust. That trust between people in yourself, like trusting yourself, and content. It provides that ultimate barrier of learning. For example, like critical thinking and discernment is a big idea right now. Let's say someone tells you new information. You've never met them before. A salesperson is telling you that this car is great, or they open up the trench coat and they've got snake oil, and they're saying, "Oh, this is the best medicine, whatever, in the world." It's like, let me think. Do I trust this person? Let me use some critical thinking. Maybe let me ask some more questions. Not blindly believing everything you hear. Maybe you're online and someone says something in a Facebook comment, or you see a video that may be generated by artificial intelligence, or a chat bot says something and it says, "Oh, it's definitely true." Um, do you really trust the source of that information? Or let's say our government has these standards of learning that says this is what it would take to be a life ready graduate. And it's like, hmm, does this entity really have my best interests at heart? Why are these the way the standards are? Well, that would be trust being a barrier to learning. Now, if you are kind of in that zone, that is our ideal for making good rational decisions. Finally, the experiential learning cycle. Experiential learning is a theory that there are several theorists who ascribe to this. One is David Kolb. The idea that we learn through experience. For me, and to David Kolb, learning is the process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience. Learning is a process. We learn by doing. For example, when you're a baby and you are this blank slate, you just start by experiencing the world. When I was I was out gathering food donations for a food drive, and I was learning each house that I went to. I experienced the very first door that I knocked on, and I gave my pitch, and I learned something from that. After the house that I knocked on, I came back and reflected, and I was like, "Ooh, how did this go? What did I notice? What can I do differently next time?" Thinking or abstract conceptualization is putting a plan together for the next time. It's like, okay, well, I noticed that I didn't mention several of the items that we were trying to donate, and I didn't receive any of those items. So let me maybe make a plan to remember to state some of these different items, and then go back out and try it again. So on the next house, I mentioned some of those items, and then I actually got different items the next time. So I learned how to like ask for donations better. And as we are learning, we are continually going throughout that process. So if you, for example, want to get better at public speaking, You go out and try to do the public speaking. You reflect on how it went. You think about what you might be able to do differently next time. Go back out and do the thing. This applies to literally every way that we can learn. Learning is a cyclical process. There are also three acts of doing that I generally put forth. Creating. So at the Care Society, we're all about creative projects. The idea that we create these experiences, products, systems, and programs. It could be a business, it could be a club. You could write a book, you can write a song, a 3D model, a piece of art. I mean, the possibilities are endless. But the idea that when we learn by doing, one of those things to do that are good is to create something, something that is original and valuable. That's kind of the definition of creative, even. Also, helping people, including yourself, because you matter. So it's not always about like creating something that maybe could solve a problem, or something that provides value for people that you actually will into existence. But if someone just needs help with something, that is a great thing to do as well, which is almost like obvious. But again, the care learning framework is the through line of human learning. Like we all agree that helping people is good to do, like living a life of service, turning outward. Wonderful things to do. Helping yourself as well. So it's not always about seeing what everybody else need. What do you need? Do you need some time alone? Do you well, we have like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Which I generally think is good. So your need for safety, your need for food, sleep, human connection, moving towards self-actualization, and then researching and discovering. So not only are we applying what we already know outward to help people, not only are we directly providing service to people, but learning new things, being exposed, generating new knowledge through kind of more formal research or science experiments. So research is often something that brings us sometimes the most challenge, although like creating can also be very challenging, especially if we've got something like writer's block, or there's a problem that's so difficult to solve, because research often involves, well, naturally, things that are new. Maybe there are some things that we really need to like look up, but we're not understanding, and that gets to be frustrating as well. But generally, creating, helping, and researching are three acts of doing, and then that process of learning is kind of how we cyclically keep going through it. And that helps spark curiosity, build skills, and connect knowledge with real world meaning. So the care learning framework is our through line of human learning, and we use this throughout everything we do in the Care Society. So I envision this framework being also a living and breathing vision. That this is probably not where this is going to stand for the rest of time, although like I would probably say caring about ourselves, each other, and learning probably will. But maybe there will be a word here that we might switch out. We'll expand on the definition. We'll keep growing in each part of this. And I also view this as we're making decisions about what to do, like with our time, really think about how can you create value for people? How can you help people? How can you research and discover new things? And with that, you can become completely self-directed. If you see someone make a post or write an article, show some curiosity. Take some time to read it. Show some compassion. Drop a comment. Ask a question. See if as someone is asking a question, see if you can actually get on a Google Meet or a Zoom call and actually help them. How can you help someone in your family or a friend? Who can you learn more about, maybe in the world, people who are different from you? Or what problems actually need to be solved that you can then create a solution for? Like when we connect this care compass and the care method, it kind of comes together for this beautiful way to live and learn better together, which is what the care learning framework is all about. So that is all about the CARE Learning Framework. And with that, hope everyone has a great rest of their day and show you care. Bye, everyone.